Why economies rise and fall, a simple explanation. Level B2, upper intermediate. When people talk about the economy, it can sound like something distant and complicated. News anchors speak about inflation, interest rates, GDP, recessions, and market confidence, as if the economy is a machine with secret buttons. But the economy is not a mystery object in the sky. It is simply the sum of millions of everyday decisions. People working, buying, selling, saving, investing, building, and planning. When these actions connect well, an economy grows. When they break, an economy slows down or falls. Economies rise and fall for many reasons, but the pattern is often similar. Growth usually happens when a country or a region becomes more productive. Productivity means producing more value with the same amount of time and resources. When productivity grows, incomes can rise without creating instability. People earn more, businesses expand, and the government collects more taxes to improve services. This is the healthy kind of growth. So, what creates productivity? The first big factor is technology. New tools, machines, software, and methods allow workers to do more in less time. Think about how farming changed with better equipment, fertilizers, and irrigation. Think about how manufacturing changed with electricity and assembly lines. Think about how modern businesses changed with computers and the internet. Technology is like a multiplier. It doesn't replace all human work, but it increases the power of human work. The second factor is education and skills. Technology is useless if people cannot use it. A skilled workforce can adopt new methods faster, avoid mistakes, and create higher quality products. This is why countries that invest in education often grow stronger in the long run. Education is slow, but it compounds. One generation of better schools can create decades of higher productivity. The third factor is infrastructure. Roads, ports, railways, electricity, clean water, and internet networks reduce costs for everyone. If a business can move goods quickly, it can sell more. If workers can travel safely, they can take better jobs. If energy is stable, factories run smoothly. Infrastructure is not glamorous, but it is a foundation. Many economic miracles are not miracles. They are the result of steady investment in basic systems. The fourth factor is institutions and trust. Investors and entrepreneurs take risks only when they believe the rules are stable. If property rights are protected, if courts work, if corruption is controlled, and if contracts are reliable, people are willing to build long-term businesses. But if rules change suddenly, if bribes are normal, and if politics decides who wins, then people become ostorozhny. Money moves out. Businesses stay small. Innovation slows. Trust is like oil in an engine. Without it, the engine still moves, but it burns more energy and breaks faster. Another driver of growth is trade. When a country trades with others, it can specialize. It can produce what it is good at and import what others produce better. Specialization increases efficiency. Trade also creates competition, which pushes businesses to improve. But trade can also create dependence. If a country relies too much on one export or one partner, it becomes vulnerable when prices drop or relationships break. Now, if these factors create growth, what causes decline? The first common reason is that growth can create its own problems. When an economy grows for a long time, people can become overconfident. Businesses borrow too much. Governments spend too much. Households take large loans. Investors start believing that prices will always go up. This is how bubbles form. A bubble happens when the price of something rises mainly because people expect it to rise, not because its real value increased. Housing bubbles are common examples. If everyone believes houses will always become more expensive, they rush to buy. Banks give more loans. Prices rise even more. Then the system becomes fragile. If something changes, interest rates rise, incomes fall, or confidence drops, people stop buying. Prices can fall quickly, and the debt remains. This can create a crisis. Debt is not always bad. Debt can help growth when it is used for productive investment, building factories, creating new technology, improving infrastructure. But debt becomes dangerous when it is used for consumption and speculation. If too much money is borrowed to buy assets that don't create real value, the economy becomes unstable. Another reason economies fall is inflation. Inflation means prices rise over time. A little inflation is normal in many countries, but high inflation becomes a problem because it reduces trust in money. If people don't know what money will be worth next month, they can't plan. Businesses struggle to set prices. Workers demand higher wages just to survive. Savings lose value. End quote. People start buying goods quickly before prices rise again. This behavior can make inflation even worse. Inflation can be caused by many things: too much money, chasing too few goods, supply shocks like energy shortages, wars, or weak confidence in government policy. Often, it's not one cause, but several causes together. And when inflation becomes extreme, it can damage the entire economy because it breaks the basic function of money, being a stable tool for exchange. The opposite problem is deflation, when prices fall. Falling prices can sound good, but it can be dangerous too. If people expect prices to keep falling, they delay purchases. Businesses earn less. They cut wages, they fire workers, and demand drops further. This can create a downward spiral. Deflation is less common, but when it happens, it can be hard to stop. Another major cause of decline is a banking crisis. Banks are like the blood system of an economy. They move money from savers to borrowers. They help businesses invest and people buy homes. But banks also create risk. If banks make too many bad loans, they can collapse. When banks collapse, credit disappears. Businesses can't borrow. People panic. The economy freezes. This is why confidence matters so much. In economics, perception can become reality. If people believe the system is safe, they behave calmly. If they believe the system is weak, they rush to protect themselves. They withdraw money, reduce spending, and avoid risk. That makes the economy shrink. Fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. A very common reason for economic decline is political instability. Investors and businesses hate uncertainty. If a country has constant conflict, unpredictable laws, corruption, or violent change, it becomes difficult to plan. Money prefers stability. Even if a country has great resources, instability can stop growth. This is why economic development is not only about money, it is also about governance and long-term planning. Demographics also matter. An economy with a growing working-age population has a natural advantage. More workers means more production and more consumption. But if a population is aging fast, a smaller group must support a larger, older group. Government spending rises for healthcare and pensions. Labor shortages appear. Growth slows unless productivity increases enough to compensate. Natural resources can also be both a blessing and a curse. Countries rich in oil, gas, or minerals can grow fast, but they can also become zivissimi. If the economy depends mainly on one resource, it becomes vulnerable to price changes. Also, easy resource money can increase corruption and weaken institutions. Economists call this the resource curse. It doesn't happen everywhere, but it is a real risk. One more important cause of decline is losing competitiveness. In the early stage, a country may grow fast by copying existing technologies and using cheap labor, but later wages rise and cheap labor advantage disappears. If the country doesn't move to higher value industries, growth slows. This is why some countries experience rapid growth for decades and then get stuck. They need innovation, education, and reform to continue climbing. Another hidden issue is inequality. If growth benefits only a small group, most people don't feel improvement. Demand becomes weaker because many people cannot buy much. Social tension rises. Politics becomes unstable. Inequality itself doesn't automatically destroy an economy, but extreme inequality can make growth fragile and create crises. So far, we've talked about factors that push economies up or down, but real economies move in cycles. Even healthy economies often go through expansions and recessions. This is normal. Businesses invest, demand rises, then capacity becomes tight, prices rise. Central banks raise interest rates, borrowing becomes expensive, and growth slows. Then the cycle resets. Recessions are painful, but they are also part of how economies adjust. The key is whether a recession is short and manageable or deep and long. Deep crises often happen when several problems combine: high debt, weak banks, political instability, and sudden shocks like war or pandemics. When multiple slabie mesta break at once, recovery becomes slower. A useful way to understand economies is to see them as systems of confidence and coordination. People coordinate through prices, wages, contracts, and rules. Confidence makes them willing to coordinate. When confidence is high, businesses invest, people spend, banks lend, and the government can plan long term. When confidence drops, everyone becomes cautious at the same time. And when everyone becomes cautious, the economy slows, even if the country still has factories, workers, and resources. In other words, the economy is not only physical, it is also psychological. This is why the rise part often begins with a positive loop. A country finds a new advantage, new technology, new markets, political reforms, peace after war, better education, or integration into global trade, productivity starts rising. Companies expand, jobs appear, wages rise, people spend more, businesses see demand and invest again. Government collects more taxes and can improve infrastructure. The improvements make business cheaper and faster. This creates more growth. The system starts feeding itself. In early stages, this growth can look like a miracle. But usually it is not magic. It is a chain reaction. The country is simply using its resources more efficiently than before. However, positive loops often create new risks. When growth lasts for years, people begin to believe the good times are permanent. This belief can be dangerous because it changes behavior. Companies borrow more. Banks take bigger risks. Investors chase higher returns. Households buy bigger homes. Governments promise more spending. Everyone feels safe. And when everyone feels safe, they stop preparing for problems. This is where the fall part can begin, not with a huge event, but with hidden fragility. The economy still looks strong, but inside it becomes more sensitive to shocks. Think of it like a beautiful tall building with weak supports. From outside, it looks impressive. Inside, the structure is under stress. Then a shock arrives. Sometimes the shock is external: a war, an oil price jump, a global recession, a pandemic, a financial crisis in another region, or a major trade conflict. Sometimes it is internal. A housing bubble breaks, a big company collapses, banks discover bad loans, or the government loses credibility. The exact trigger can be different, but the result is often similar. Confidence drops. Once confidence drops, the economy can enter a negative loop. People spend less because they fear the future. Businesses earn less, so they cut investment and hire fewer workers. Workers lose jobs or worry about losing jobs, so they spend even less. Banks become cautious, so they lend less, even to good businesses. Good businesses can't expand, so growth slows further. Government tax income falls, while social spending rises, so public finances become stressed. If the government reacts badly, confidence drops even more. The negative loop becomes stronger. End quote. End quote. This is why recessions can be so difficult. They are not only a lack of money, they are a breakdown of coordination. Everyone pulls back at the same time, which makes the situation worse. It's like a crowd in a narrow street. If everyone tries to move backward at the same moment, the crowd can crush itself. So, what do governments and central banks do to stop the negative loop? One common tool is monetary policy, controlled by the central bank. The central bank can change interest rates. When the economy is overheating and inflation is rising, central banks often raise interest rates. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive. That reduces spending and investment, which cools the economy. This can help control inflation, but it can also slow growth. When the economy is weak, central banks often lower interest rates. Lower rates make borrowing cheaper. That encourages spending, investment, and hiring. In theory, this supports recovery. But there is a limit. Interest rates can't go far below zero in most systems. And if confidence is very low, people may not borrow even when rates are low. That's why monetary policy is powerful, but not magic. Another tool is fiscal policy, controlled by the government. Fiscal policy means taxes and spending. During a recession, governments can increase spending on infrastructure, support programs, or public services. The idea is to podderzeit demand. If private spending falls, public spending can fill the gap. Governments can also cut taxes to give people and businesses more money to spend. This can help stop the negative loop. But fiscal policy also has limits. Government spending increases debt. If investors worry that the government will not be able to repay, borrowing costs can rise. In some cases, a government can create confidence by spending smartly. In other cases, it can create fear by spending badly or without a plan. The quality of policy matters, not only the size. This brings us to a key point. Economies don't fall only because of numbers. They fall because of institutions and decisions. Two countries can face the same shock, but one recovers quickly while the other collapses. Why? A big difference is trust. If citizens and investors trust the government, they believe crises will be managed. They keep spending and investing. They accept temporary pain, like higher taxes or temporary restrictions, because they believe it will help long-term stability. But if trust is low, any policy looks suspicious. People think leaders are lying or stealing. They move money out. They avoid paying taxes. Businesses hide. This makes recovery harder. Another difference is flexibility. Some economies can move resources quickly. Workers can retrain. Businesses can change industries. Regulations allow new companies to grow. In flexible economies, a shock hurts, but adaptation begins fast. In rigid economies, the system resists change. Old industries stay alive artificially. New industries struggle, and unemployment stays high. Debt levels also shape recovery. If households and businesses have too much debt, they spend years paying it down. Even when the economy starts improving, they remain cautious. Banks remain cautious too. This creates slow recovery. Economists sometimes call this a balance sheet recession. The economy is not only weak because demand is low, it is weak because everyone is repairing financial damage. Now let's talk about why economies rise and fall across decades, not only in short cycles. Over the long term, growth often depends on moving up the value chain. Many countries start with agriculture or basic manufacturing. Then they grow with industrialization. Later, they must shift to higher value services, technology, and complex production. This shift is difficult. It requires education, research, stable institutions, and often painful reforms. If a country cannot shift, it can become stuck in the middle. Wages are too high to compete with cheap labor countries, but skills and innovation are not high enough to compete with rich countries. This is sometimes called the middle income trap. Countries that escape this trap usually invest heavily in human capital and productivity. They build strong education systems. They support innovation. They create stable business environments. They fight corruption. They open markets carefully. They build infrastructure. They also create social policies that keep society stable during change. Social stability is not a luxury. It supports growth because it reduces chaos and conflict. Another long-term force is globalization. Over recent decades, global trade and global supply chains helped many countries grow. Companies could produce goods where costs were low and sell where demand was high. Consumers got cheaper products. Businesses gained scale. But globalization also created vulnerabilities. Supply chains became thinly and fragile. A shock in one region can stop production everywhere. Also, globalization created winners and losers inside countries. Some workers gained opportunities, others lost jobs to competition. That increased inequality and political tension in many places. Today, we also see a new trend: partial deglobalization. Some countries want to bring production home for security reasons. They want resilient supply chains. They worry about divisiveness on rivals. This may increase stability in some ways, but it can also increase costs and reduce efficiency. That can affect long-term growth. End quote. So, the modern economy is balancing efficiency and security, and this balance is not easy. Technology is another modern force. New technologies can raise productivity, but they can also disrupt jobs. Automation and AI may change labor markets. If societies manage retraining well, technology can increase growth and living standards. If they manage it badly, inequality can rise and social conflict can grow. Again, institutions matter. Now, let's answer the key question in the title. Why do economies rise and fall in a simple way? They rise when productivity improves and confidence supports investment. They fall when fragility builds and confidence breaks. The triggers can be different, but the underlying mechanics are often similar. Positive loops turn into negative loops. So how can you understand economic news without getting lost? A simple habit is to ask a few basic questions whenever you hear a headline. Is the problem about productivity or about demand? Is it a short shock or a long structural weakness? Is debt rising or falling? Are banks stable? Is inflation rising or falling? Do people trust institutions? Is the country flexible enough to adapt? You don't need to be an economist to think this way. These questions help you see what matters under the surface. They also help you avoid emotional headlines that make everything sound like the end of the world. The final lesson is that economies are living systems. They are not perfect machines. They move in cycles. They react to human psychology. They are shaped by policy, culture, and global events. Decline is not always permanent, and growth is not always safe. The healthiest economies are not the ones that never face problems. They are the ones that can adapt, reform, and rebuild trust when problems arrive. That is why economies rise and fall, not because fate decides it, but because humans build systems, and humans sometimes manage them well and sometimes manage them badly.